Welcome to the Longest Day podcast. I'm Leah, your host and the founder of Broadstairs Consulting. We help rebuild relationships and facilitate effective dialogue. We are convinced that people matter and that conversations count, so we started The Longest Day, a series of conversations where we learn from the resilience, determination, and candor of our guests. As they look back on their longest days, our hope is that it will empower you to look forward. We hope their stories will be a part of shaping yours. Professor Lynn Robson is the Dean of the University of Oxford's Regent College. She's the college's safeguarding lead, as well as the director of the Visiting Student Programme. She is the tutor for admissions for English and joint director of studies for classics and English. Professor Robson teaches early modern literature from 1550 to 1760 to undergraduates, which is how she met Faith, who kindly introduced us. As you will hear, Professor Robson has an abiding interest in lifelong learning and is a senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy UK. She has received a number of awards from Oxford University. This conversation is an absolute joy. Well, Dr. Robson, thank you so much for being willing to come on The Longest Day.
Thank you for asking me. It's a pleasure.
I wonder if you might cast your mind back and tell our listeners about your longest day.
Yes, I will do, Leah. It's very interesting. Being asked to do this make me reflect very deeply on what might have been my longest day. And I came to the conclusion when I thought about it that actually my longest day started on the 26th of March 2020, which was the day the government announced the lockdown, the first lockdown, and it finished on September the 13th, 2021. And I hope you'll excuse me because that sounds as though I'm kind of being a bit cheeky about this, taking sort of around 18 months as my longest day.
No, we love the freedom.
But thank you very much. But when I thought about it, when I reflected on that period, I thought, well, it seemed like a single day. And there is an arc from that moment in March 2020 when none of us knew what was going to happen. We just knew life was going to change completely. And we were walking forwards without knowing where we were going. And then by the time I got to September the 13th, 2021, I was exhausted. On that day, didn't know how I was going to carry on with what I needed to do. And to give people some context, the middle of September at Oxford University, you're a month away from the start of a new academic year. So that is the point at which you start to feel optimistic and you start to plan and think about welcoming all the new students and starting afresh. And I simply didn't know how I was going to do that at that point.
Was there anything in your career that prepared you for the challenges you faced during the pandemic?
I think that in my life, I've had two careers. So I started when I was 18 and I trained as a nurse, and I had a career in the National Health Service for 20 years, and I specialised in critical care nursing. So you can imagine the skills that taught me. Well, the skills that taught me resilience. It taught me responsibility. It taught me that I had the capacity to deal with some very difficult and distressing situations. It also taught me the value of working in a team, because I couldn't have done that job. None of us could do that job without the team around us. So it taught me all of those things. It taught me loyalty to an institution. Those are the positive things. It also taught me not to complain. It taught me to get on with the job that I'd been given. And I think if you work in, certainly when I trained as a nurse, I think it's probably a bit different now. But no, that's not quite true, because that was also true during the pandemic, wasn't it? Self-sacrifice. Yes? You put your own good down to the bottom of the list because there are other people who need you. And so you stop thinking about yourself and putting yourself at the centre, and you put other people ahead of you. So I suppose that's what prepared me. So I've always been able to take responsibility. And coming into academia as a second career, I brought all of that life experience and professional experience with me into academic life.
If you weren't to set aside your own needs, how would you describe your day-to-day experience during that longest day period?
So it was juggling several highly different, very demanding roles all the time. And each of those roles was relentless. Normally, under normal circumstances, without the Groundhog Day of the pandemic, one role might become more important for a while because you've got a particular thing to deal with, or it's time limited. So you know that you've only got to do this for a few weeks and then you don't have to think about it again for 7 months. But all of my roles during that time were relentless because there was always the need to respond, as we'll all remember, to things changing very quickly, putting plans in place. So I should be precise. So my main role that I'm in at the moment is I'm Dean of the college. Now, what that means is that it's my responsibility to make sure that there's a safe environment for the students who are here. And by safety, I mean, obviously, policies like policies around bullying and harassment. So it very much is around safety as behaviour and how we treat one another as individuals within the college. I'm safeguarding lead for the college as well. So that's a big responsibility. And in normal circumstances, but all the deans in all the colleges in Oxford during the pandemic became minor public health officials. So those responsibilities extended to, putting people into residential bubbles, explaining to 18-year-old students why they couldn't, come out of those bubbles and what the reason for that was. And then planning for whatever the next thing the government had announced was, and then unplanning probably the next day and replanning. I mean, that was relentless for 18 months. And normally, an academic year, we do get some downtime. We have vacations, we have some time off, Easter, Christmas, longer time off during the summer. We didn't get any time off. We kept working. And there were students from my teaching responsibilities. Students had to learn. Students had to do their exams. Students needed to graduate. Students needed to arrive at university and start their courses while all of this was going on. So that side of things was relentless.
One of the benefits of being part of a faculty, even if you were responsible for all of it, is that there's more than just you. Who did you have around you during that 18 months?
I had, all my colleagues here, both in the college and at the faculty. I had a major faculty role as well, overseeing undergraduate admissions for the whole university for the English degree. Again, that's usually a job that is very busy between October and December, and then not really busy at all from January to August, gets very busy around A-level confirmation and then doesn't get busy again until October. But because everything had to change, we had to move everything online and so on and so on. That again became a year-round event, a year-round job. So I had my colleagues in the faculty. We were all working under the same kind of pressure. I had my colleagues here in college, to whom I'm probably closest. But as we all remember from that time, a lot of this was being done online. Yes? And although you're getting support from colleagues through Zoom meetings and team meetings and conversations, it really isn't the same as being able to walk down the corridor to somebody who's in an office 3 doors away and say, can I talk to you for 5 minutes because something has just happened that I need to discuss with you. So the support was there, but it was very different, and it was in some ways not as instant. Yes. And I had the experience of working with some colleagues who were vulnerable, themselves classed as vulnerable, so didn't physically come into the building in which we're sitting for 2 years. So I had one colleague who was in college. We used to take it in turns to come into college because we had vulnerable students resident in college as well who needed our support and care. And she was our head of welfare, and we worked together very, very closely throughout that time and supported each other, and drew a lot of strength from each other as well, and felt we each understood what we were doing. So, yes, that one colleague.
You've mentioned that this is your second career.
Yeah.
What did you learn about yourself during those pandemic days?
I learnt that I had more strength than I thought I did. But I also learnt that there were limits to that strength and that I needed to recognise that. I suppose a more, how I would now say it to myself, was that I learned that I was vulnerable. And that is not easy when you've come through 2 careers where actually your value to an organisation or an institution is to not appear vulnerable, to be able to appear as if you can cope with everything. So I learnt that was an important lesson. And also that day in September 2021, when I realised I couldn't go on, was what saved me was I went and I said to somebody, I'm really finding this hard. I don't know what to do. And I actually went and expressed that vulnerability to someone else.
Why do you think it took you so long to do that?
Oh, there's the question. Why did it take? Because...
Especially as somebody who has been holding space for the welfare of others and seeing the challenges.
I know. That's such an important lesson, though, isn't it? And it's the hardest lesson to learn. Look after yourself first, because when you look after yourself, then you're better at looking after others. Yeah, it's okay to know that. Whether you can live it every single day when the demands come thick and fast, and you just need to be able to help others and say, yes, I can do this. Why? It's been a whole life learning that, yes. But it was a really important lesson to think about how I valued myself and what I thought others valued in me. And I'll go back to the vulnerability. I found, I went to a colleague and I said, I do not know how I'm going to carry on here. And that colleague said to me, do you think you should go and talk to somebody about this? Seek some counselling. And that was a moment, because that's the advice I give to other people all the time. Do you think you should go and talk to somebody? To have somebody say that to me was a real moment for me. And it brought me up short. I'm so pleased that she said that to me, because that's exactly what I did.
Well-being. You know the facts. Things are worse than ever. Burnout, trauma, absence, attrition. Leaders are tired of the empty gesturing about mental health. Leaders are resigned to ticking boxes, obliged to throw money away on medically flimsy, temporary solutions that have failed workforces. Adagio VR is the culmination of decades of work by a fellow of the Royal College of Psychiatrists. Partners of the NHS and Oxford University, this is the world's first ever virtual reality program using clinical therapeutics accessible anywhere. Take meaningful action. Remove the need to cope. Adagio VR.
How has that experience of recognising your own limits transformed your ability to give good care to the students that you serve?
Yeah. It's taught me that it's not weakness to say to somebody, I'm feeling uncomfortable in this situation. I feel vulnerable too. or to say to students, in my role as dean, inevitably, I have to deal with some very serious issues, often around harassment, concerns about bullying or sexual violence. That's something that I do quite regularly. And I've learned that if I say to somebody who comes seeking my advice and support, yes, this is a really bad and difficult situation, and we're both sitting here feeling that, yes? So let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. So I think that it's made me, as always, much, much better at supporting others. When I was a nurse, I got so much better at supporting families whose child, partner, sibling was dying after my own parents died. I understood what they were going through, and I was much better at what I did.
As leaders, we often long for empathy from others. As you've gone through this experience of learning more about yourself and seeking support, how have you found empathy in the people that you work with, even now?
Oh no, that's an excellent question. Very perceptive. One of the most difficult things for me as we emerged from the pandemic, again, this is the lead up to the September 2021, was that some of the people I work with who had not been here because they had been working from home consistently because they were vulnerable, did not want to ask me what my experience had been. And I felt part of the reason I got to the point that I did was that my feeling was I was constantly being asked to understand their point of view and their vulnerabilities. And yet I did not feel that I was being asked or accorded the same measure of respect for what my experience was. I mean, some colleagues, yes, but there were a number who could not. And I would rather say could not than did not. Yes?
We do live in the UK in a fear-based society. What do you think would help leaders to be able to overcome the fear that they have of other people's experiences so that everyone who's working together in a leadership role can be seen and heard?
I think leaders need to take the lead in being able to say, I'm finding this hard. I find this difficult. This is distressing me. This is making me feel uncomfortable. Or I don't know what the solution to this is. However, if we discuss it and we support one another, it's likely that we will find a solution. And I think that's what true leaders should do.
As you look out on your student population, what is the one thing that you want your students to go away from Oxford with in terms of being equipped to be future leaders in society?
I want them to have begun to learn how to value themselves and not to wait for somebody else to tell them how valuable they are, but to be able to look at themselves and say, this is who I am, and this is why I think I am a good person, and these are my talents, and they are important, and I don't need somebody else to tell me that. I can understand that is the case, yes? One of the things I often find myself saying to students when they come to seek my advice and support is we never know what somebody else is thinking. We never know what somebody else is feeling. And we probably need to ask them, but we can't assume. Yeah, we often project that person is disapproving of me. That person thinks I'm not clever enough. That person thinks I'm not a good person. Yeah, you don't know that. So that's what I would want them to take with them.
I was having that very conversation with somebody even yesterday.
Yeah.
As you look back over your longest day, is there anything that you wish that you'd done differently?
Yes. I wish I'd learned to say no earlier. no, I can't do that. Don't ask me to do that. I might be able to do that if you give me a bit more time. So I wish I'd learned the word no. But I also wish I'd learned a lot earlier to say to people, please help me. I'm finding this hard.
Yes. Such bravery required to do that. But it's so empowering and freeing.
Yes, and that's what I've learned. Yes, that's what I've learned. Now, if I go to colleagues and I would just say, and I work very hard not to say it in a way that suggest I'm blaming them in any way whatsoever, or that I just say to them, somebody says to me, oh, how's your day? Yes. Or you go, oh, it's fine. We all do that. Oh, fine. And I actually say, well, actually, today's quite difficult. Yeah, I've been dealing with some things that I actually have made me feel this or that. And actually, I find that being able to say that to colleagues, I usually get back from them. Oh, yes, I understand. I had a day like that the other day.
Last question. Many days formed your longest day. But if you had to live the worst one again, what food would you choose to fuel it?
You mean actual food?
Actual food. What would you eat if you could have any food available to you to comfort you on that day?
On that day, I think it would have been some Chinese dumplings. Which I learnt to love when I went to China, and which to me are like the ultimate comfort food.
I will have you know, we have never had a repeat favourite food on the longest day to date, and I do hope that trend continues. Lynn, thank you so much for sharing yourself, sharing your story, sharing your experiences, sharing your learnings, and helping us to think about how we can be better leaders by being more honest.
Yeah, thank you, Leah, because it's been really great to have this opportunity to think about it. Thank you.
You've been listening to a Broadstairs Consulting Limited podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. Tune in soon to hear the next instalment of The Longest Day. Copyright 2024, production copyright Broadstairs Consulting Limited, all rights reserved.